Hello everybody. My name is Timo Lappi and I will be the boring lawyer here amongst all of you innovative, agile people. To start with, a few words about my own background, what I have been doing and why I am here. I'm first of all a lawyer. I started my career in the oldest law office in Finland. It's around 120 years old nowadays. And still I would say that nowadays quite an agile organization. But then it was around 9 years ago when I then made a career move and then went to an own company called Fondia. It was only a handful of people at that time. And after that we have been then growing that as an international player in the law office field with nowadays a bit more than 100 employees. And then I would say that also there I've been then evidencing how that kind of small organization, when it grows, what kind of phases it will be living and what kind of organization structures and so on you need in what phase and so on. And unfortunately, I was just having a discussion here at the break, what I have been evidencing that when growing, we have been then losing part of our agility at Fondia's side. But we are then trying to be awake in order then to keep the organization alive and renewing all the time. In addition to being a lawyer, I'm also an entrepreneur from Fondia's side, but also then made small investments to a handful of startup companies and from that viewpoint then sitting in the board of directors of a handful of startup or growth companies. That's one viewpoint I have to the board work and agile methods is the boards of directors of these startups. But then I also have another viewpoint, which is that I'm then also acting as a professional secretary, as a legal counsel for 2 public listed companies. And then I'm present at the board of directors of these 2 public listed companies and also then seeing what kind of board work exists in larger companies and in more regulated companies also. That must then take into consideration of stock exchange rules and so on. And if thinking about my background, I could consider myself of some kind of board professional and also then a legal professional. But then on the other hand, I know the basics about agile thinking. I'm not an expert on that field. And that's why it has been really interesting task for me then to try to find out and then prepare this presentation, how to combine then certain basics of agile thinking then to board work and what there exists today in the market and what there doesn't exist. And I would say that it's quite a clean table at the moment to think what will it be like to use agile methods in board work. When I then naturally was then looking for information for my presentation, what I then did, I then put to Google agile board and what you then receive when you put that, you see this kind of agile boards, but not that much of these gray-haired gentlemen sitting at board tables and board meetings. My agenda that I have for this 40 minutes ahead of us, it's divided into certain sections. And I would like to start with just discussing with you about traditional board work, about the board work in practice, and also the legislation that's there behind board work. There's one really important issue to remember always when discussing about board work is that it's a statutory position to be a board member in a limited company, and that means that in the event you are not careful, in the event that somebody could say that you have been negligent, in that event it may end up you paying damages to the creditors of the company or something like that. So there are risks involved for the persons who are sitting in the boards, and that of course then sets certain limitations for the working practice of the boards. But it's only an excuse, I would say, for renewing the processes that are used today. After that, the second section would be then about budgets and reporting. I've experienced a lot of frustrations in different boards in what comes to budgets and reporting. I think that when boards do not work that efficiently, it will be ending up so that in the meetings, the board members will be really carefully reading the reporting and having really detailed questions about the reporting, and then they have wishes for more reporting and so on. So it may end up so that the board meetings, in fact, will be just reporting and budgeting meetings, and that will then end up in no time being left then for the important stuff. And then, as a third entity, for myself, this was the most fun part to prepare the presentation. I took the 12 principles of Agile Manifesto that are then meant for software development, and I was then thinking that what if we would be converting those to board work? What kind of principles would they be then? So let's then go those through in section number 3, and then number 4, chairman's checklist. That's then intended to be some kind of summary. What kind of concrete advice would I be giving to a chairman, how to elect a board and how to organize the meetings so that they would be as efficient as possible. And then I'm really hoping that we could then have some kind of discussion here. As said, I'm not a real Agile professional, and I'm really also then looking forward to learning new things from you here. Any questions at this stage, or wishes, what to stress in the presentation and what not? I'm sure they will then be popping out when we continue. So to start with, first about the board work and legislation. And because I'm a lawyer, I really must show you the organization chart here. We love these kinds of charts, but let's do this really quickly. What kind of organization there will be in limited liability companies? Naturally, the ultimate power, they are with the shareholders, but they're with the shareholders only when they are then convened at a shareholders meeting. Typically once in a year, the annual general meeting of shareholders, and I would say that the most interesting resolutions that are made there are, first of all, distribution of dividends. That's then news for the shareholders, but then also the election of the board members. And who will be then electing the board members? It's really simple. It's so that it's the majority of the votes that are present in the AGM. Every now and then you read in the newspapers that somebody, for example, in a public listed company, somebody has 20% and should be then given a board seat. But that's not real. In practice, you need just, it's really simple, more than 50% of the votes who, or the person or persons who control those votes have the right then to appoint the board themselves. And then as a second one, we have here supervisory board, and I would say that thank God we do not have these that much anymore. The supervisory board's only role in practice was then to nominate the board. And you will be then seeing supervisory boards every now and then. Still, I would say that mainly in Finland, state-owned companies, and I would say that they are really nice places for politicians then to get some free benefits and then have certain fees for the meetings and so on, and without then knowing anything of the business. But then the really interesting parts here are, first of all, the board of directors and then the managing director. And in certain companies, the managing director may also be a board member, especially in small companies. But in larger companies, that's not that much recommended. And it's so that the shareholders, they then elect the board of directors, and the board of directors' responsibility is then to make all the major decisions in the company, and then the managing director's duty is then to take care of all the ongoing issues, so day-to-day activities and day-to-day resolutions. And I would say that the most important decision of a board of directors is then to nominate the managing director. One person who is sitting at a board of one Finnish public listed company, said to me that, Timo, I think that the most important task of a board is to monitor that the managing director will not become crazy, and in the event that she or he does, then replace him or her. And then this division of responsibilities between board and managing director, that's a really interesting, I would say, that balance of power between these organs. And based on the personalities and based on the company culture and so on, the board may then end up in really different positions. And here I have 4 typical positions. It may be that, first of all, there is a company where the idea is that the Companies Act has a regulation that we must have a board, so let's nominate somebody there. But they are just collected in-house from the organization and without the real intention to get some kind of winning team there. And then it also may be that the CEO, it's also one of the entrepreneurs, for example, and then we'll be then ending up in a situation where the board might have, for example, just 1 meeting per year and so on. And also the CEO would be just one of the entrepreneurs, and then we would have a really sluggish board. It would be typical, for example, in a startup or in some kind of small professional services organization where we might, for example, have 4 partners or something like that who would be then doing the decision between themselves, and then just somebody would have been nominated as a CEO, and the board would be those same 4 people. For example, I'm acting as a founder of one startup at the healthcare sector, and there we are at this stage. And the entrepreneurs, they are doing the decisions at the moment, and there's no real need for a board yet. And then in the event that there would be a strong entrepreneur acting as a CEO, and the CEO would be then nominating the board in practice from the organization and maybe some friends from outside and so on, we might be ending up in a situation where the CEO has a really strong position, and then on the other hand, the board is quite weak. The CEO would be controlling what kind of issues to be taken to the board and what kind of issues just he or she would be then resolving him or herself. In that event, we would be having some kind of a stamp board. And I would say that personally, I wouldn't be willing to take a seat in that kind of board for example, from a liability or risk perspective. You would not have a genuine visibility to the company then. Then there could be also then another system where we would have a really strong board. We would have a really strong personalities there, typically people who have also been then running the business before or who know the organization well. And then it ends up in a situation where the board of directors just cannot resist the temptation to start leading the company themselves, although they should be leaving that task for the CEO. And then we would be then ending in a situation where the CEO would be quite weak, and then on the other hand, the board in fact would be using parts of the powers of the CEO. And surprisingly, as in all of these diagrams, it's the best alternative. It's also always in the right up corner. It's also here, it would be the participating board, where the board and CEO would be functioning great together, and then the CEO would be leading the company, and then the board would be then cooperating with the CEO and the management team in order to make the strategy, and then also in order to make all the great resolutions and so on. It's quite interesting if you think about public discussion about the boards and CEOs. Let's, for example, think about Nokia a few years ago when they did the original Microsoft deal. What was the public opinion in Finland? It was that Stephen Elop is an asshole, that he did that decision, and he should be fired and he put in jail and everything like that. But then in the end of the day, if you think about that kind of decision, would that be a CEO's decision? I would say that naturally not. It was part of strategy, and it was the board of directors who made it, and then it was the CEO's obligation just to execute the decision. And what happens then normally when the company is not doing that well? The CEO gets fired, and I would say that in practice, quite in many occasions where the company is not doing that well, it's not the CEO to blame. They might be having a wrong strategy, and it should be the board of directors who should be then getting fired, but that's quite seldom still in Finland. It was an event around 2 years ago. I was interviewing Mr. Risto Siilasmaa about his role as the chairman of Nokia, and somebody then posed a really good question to him, that how do you divide then your roles in practice with the CEO in Nokia? And it was an exact answer from him that it's really simple and it's really easy. The CEO leads the company, and then it's the chairman who leads the board work. And I would say that although it sounds really simple, then in practice it's really difficult for many seasoned businessmen who have been CEOs in companies before then just to try to hold their horses and stick to the board work and not to be stepping on the toes of the CEO. When you think about board work, I have always two different viewpoints to that. First of all, naturally as a lawyer, the Companies Act viewpoint, and then in addition also the practical viewpoint based on experiences. And the Companies Act and the practices, they may differ quite a lot every now and then. First of all, about the board duties, I would say that the most important issues from the Companies Act are that, first of all, it's the board of directors who have the general powers in the company. So in the event there is something that doesn't belong clearly to another organization in the company, such as the shareholders meeting or the CEO, then it will be the board's responsibility to take care of that. And then I would say that, as said earlier, the most important task in practice is to nominate the right CEO, and also then to be ready to change the guy or to change the woman when the time is right for that. But then one issue when thinking about then the budgeting and reporting and so on, I was just blaming typical boards before here that they're using too much time for that. But then we must have some sympathy for the board members in those duties, because then it's one of the responsibilities of a board member then to really supervise that those issues are done diligently in the company. And in the event that there would be something wrong, it might also then, in the end of the day, end up in personal liabilities. I would say that in practice, as said, the most difficult question is the division of powers between CEO and board members. The decision making in the board, based on the law, it's also then really simple. It's so that in practice the meeting is constitutes a quorum when more than 1/2 of the members are present. So if we have a five-member board, it's required that at least 3 of them are present. But then in addition, all of the 5 have been then invited for the meeting, so that they have been reserved the opportunity to attend. And then in the event that the board members disagree, then there will be a vote, and then it's the single majority who will then be deciding what to do. In the event there would be a tie, then the chairman's vote will be the casting vote. How about in practice then? It's really different. I would say that I've been present in maybe 100, a few hundred board meetings, something like that, but I've never seen that there would have been a vote. A well-working board works in that way that they are discussing, they have the same objectives and so on, and they will be finding the resolution themselves or between themselves and making compromises and so on. I would say that in typical organization, if we forget about the politics and the state-owned companies and so on, you never vote in the board. One really important issue is to keep in mind that what is the duty of a board member. In the shareholders' agreement, you might have a provision that the 3 largest shareholders have the right to nominate one board member to the board of directors. Although you would be nominated by certain shareholder, you must not be representing that shareholder at the board, but you should be representing all the shareholders and the company, and you also should always be then treating all the shareholders in an equal manner. And if you think this as a starting point, you understand then much better why they are not much more voting than this. I would say that then in practice, what's really important to have a good board meeting is that first there is an active chairman who really would be thinking that what will be our agenda, what will be the focus areas of our next meeting. Then there would be a good documentation ready before the meeting, and that would be then delivered well in advance to the board members, who would then actually read the documentation after that, and then the board meeting would be some kind of a discussion event to try to find the best possible outcome about the problems. Typically, the boards where I've been active, they convene monthly in order to just do the reporting and such issues. The meetings might be then a few hours or half a day. And then I would say that a good meeting would be such that there would be some theme in each of the meetings. It might be the brand in some meeting and the product development in the next meeting and so on, but there would be a deeper discussion about something in addition to the reporting side. Based on the law, the CEO is the only outside person who has the right to be present, but in practice, my recommendation is that there would be all the relevant persons. If there's an interesting project going on in the company and the board would be discussing that project, why on the earth wouldn't you have the person who is responsible for that project then to discuss with the board? A well-functioning board doesn't discuss only with the CEO, but it has also other contacts in the company, and at the same time it doesn't overtake the CEO, but it will be having the discussions with those persons when the CEO is present. The Companies Act requires that there will be minutes delivered from each meeting, just in order to provide evidence about the meeting, what has been handled there. And then if we are moving forward in the presentation, in the first part we were discussing the company law prerequisites about the board work and then certain practical viewpoints also. And I think that as a conclusion we can conclude altogether here that the Companies Act, it's quite flexible. The only points to remember is to be diligent, to take into consideration the equality of all the shareholders, to carefully appoint the CEO, and then to use some efforts then to monitor the bookkeeping and the assets of the company from the liability point. How about then about budgets and reporting? And I really wanted to take this as a independent topic for this presentation, because it's one really, I would say, that effective manner for the board to use its powers in the company, to control the management and to steer the company. And then it's also a really effective way to, I would say, waste time in the meetings as well. And that's why it's really interesting to discuss this also with you here. When I go to a board meeting, I always keep in mind the old 80-20 rule. And I think that if we have the meeting of half a day, a few hours, it should be so that 80% of that time, at least, should be devoted to the really actually the important stuff like discussing the strategy or having discussions about certain themes of the meeting. And then at maximum 20% of the time could then be used for just discussing the monthly report provided by the CEO. And there's some strange force that I cannot explain that is existing. That is that for some reason this tends to go the opposite direction, so that 80% of the time, or if not 100% of the time, would be going to the reporting side, and then 20% for the important stuff. And I think that one issue is that it's easier to discuss the reporting than the more difficult discussions about the themes or about what the future will be like in 5 years or something. And it's in the event that it's not happening, I would say that it's the chairman to be blamed, and it should be then the chairman to be changed. It should not be a position of glory to have something in your visit card. It should be a really professional position also. The chairman doesn't have to be the best expert in the board about the business of the company, but the chairman should be the best expert how to create a really effective meeting. I was in Nordic Business Forum 1.5 years ago. There was Jack Welch then present, and he was also then having really, I would say that, strong speeches about budgeting. He was of the opinion that it's one of the worst issues that exist at the moment at larger companies. The companies are devoting a massive amount of energy then just to discuss budgeting and to prepare the budgets, and after that to follow them. First of all, they use massive amounts of energy for that, and what happens to the company when the budget is then made? In practice, it means that the company cannot react to any changes after that during the next year. They will be living with the same budget that was then certified in December or November. I had a really interesting experience the same night. I got the opportunity to have dinner with Mr. Welch there. We were maybe 8 or 10 people there, and I must admit that I was really nervous before that, hearing all the speeches before and knowing the harsh reputation, or really, I would say that the tough reputation of Mr. Welch. And then on the other hand, what happened was that he was just the contrary that you could be expecting. He was not discussing about himself. He was really asking questions from all the other and making all the other people then feeling themselves important. And after that, what he did then, after having left the table and going to the airport, he was tweeting from his mobile phone. And I just was reading an article about the Finnish public listed company CEOs who are active in Twitter. Do you remember how many there are? Not First North listed, but the larger companies. There are 1. And if this guy, who is I think 80 years old at the moment, if he has the time and capabilities to be active in Twitter, what excuses could our leaders here in Finland have in practice? None. It's Pertti Korhonen of Outotec. So as said, the traditional budgeting, it's broken, and as we mentioned, it takes a huge amount of energy, and then it kills the flexibility from the company to respond. And this is one issue what I was really thinking when making this presentation. What's there in practice then? In the companies where I'm active, I would say that most of them still do traditional budgeting. Then in addition, they make latest estimates for the year, where they will be then able to be better predicting the future. But they have not yet gone to the rolling forecasts. And then after reading then beyond budgeting and these 12 beyond budgeting principles, I would say that a new world opened to me after having read this, how a company should be managed. You will be then able also to find this in the internet when you just are searching for beyond budgeting, and then you will be finding these 12 principles. I will be not using our common time here for going all this through here, but I would say that as a summary, a company should not be run on an annual basis, and that a company should not be run on a hierarchy basis. But if you think through these 12 principles, you'll be seeing that there should be a common cause, and then there should be people forecasting a future, and then there should be flexible models for then changing the forecasts and reacting to changes. And I think that based on my experiences, the Finnish companies that I've been seeing, they have really a lot to do here, and I would say that there would be quick wins and low-hanging fruits and whatever by then taking these into use. Okay, and then the 12 agile principles for boards. I'm sure you are familiar with the 12 agile principles for software agile development. And what I've done here, I've listed these principles for software development and then thought what they could then be like if somebody would have been written those just for board work. One really important issue to start with for each and every board would be that what is the board's highest priority? It is not to control the CEO. It is not to control the bookkeeping. The highest priority is to satisfy the company's customers. I would say that in the event the customers are happy, in practice it also then means that the shareholders would be happy. I was thinking about putting here to maximize the shareholder value, but after that I thought that the customers might be even more important. In everything that the board does, it would be thinking about the customers. Thanks for the applause. And then I also been present in numerous strategy workshops in different boards, in small and large companies. And what is the most common pitfall in those is that when you mention the word strategy to the board members, some kind of flip happens. They think that strategy must be something really abstract. You should be thinking on a really high level. And then the discussion, when it starts, it will be about the world problems and about the 50 years time frames and so on. And then what will be the outcome is some kind of sentence, for example. One sentence where each and every word have been thought really clearly, what we are, what we want to become. And then with that sentence, then the people are happy and think that now we did our strategy. And what then is forgotten is that the strategy should be something also quite ongoing activity, or it should be in our everyday life, and it should be something that the company could really use when doing its everyday decisions. And I would say that the issue here is that people think it's just too complex. So, I would say the simple would be beautiful. And there, naturally, also the strategy process would be really important. If you think about a normal board professional, they are not professional in strategy projects or strategy processes. And in the event there would be a person who would be then establishing the process in the board, the outcome would be much better. So in practice, not just saving the world, but also issues that could be really executed and also at a shorter time frame.
How big do you see for the 5-year strategy plan?
My experience is in practice is that the boards typically I'm quite skeptic here today, at least, but typically they would be making that 5-year plan. And what would be happening then next year? They would like forget the previous year's work and do a new 5-year plan, and maybe using a different process for that. And then there could be that the first year's outcome was 100 pages of PDFs, and then the next year was 3, and then number 3. So it would be a really different process, and there would be certain common issues, but then the work would not be systematic. And I'm sure that there are companies in Finland who are really professional in doing their strategy work. I've just not yet been at their boards, but I'm quite pessimistic about the strategy work situation today, still at least in smaller companies. And then in the Agile principles, it says that business people and developers must work together. And I would say that at board work, the board of directors and the operative management must work closely and continuously together. And how to interpret this is that it is not enough that the CEO will be coming to the meetings, but the board members should, through the meetings, also personally know the other CXO persons from the company, at least the management team. And it wouldn't hurt, although the board members would even be present at some kind of social events of the company and so on. So the board should not be that separated. And it's a tricky issue, because then at the same time you also must remember that the board should not overcome the CEO by then just contacting the organization themselves, but they should have a good working relationship. We had a good example here in the Finnish press, was it last autumn, when it was this board professional Soili Suonoja who had been then contacted the organization, was it of Finavia or something, about that straight just overcoming the CEO, and then it ended up by then her resigning from the board. And then number 5, when the original principles say that build projects around motivated individuals, I would say that in the board, as said, the most important task is to find the right man or woman for the CEO position. And the board should be brave in this decision, and at least it should not act in that way that in order to maximize their own power, they would be taking a weaker person than to take the CEO role. This happens still in certain companies. And then after the CEO has then started, the board should really be supporting the CEO, not only challenging the CEO in the company. And as in other agile environments also at board work, the most efficient and effective method of changing information is face-to-face conversation. And the person whose responsibility is to ensure that there will be time for this face-to-face conversation is the chairman. The chairman's position, based on law, it's the only task in practice. A few tasks are to convene the board, and then in addition to be one party to sign the minutes. Otherwise, the chairman is considered as one of the board members. But I would say that in practice, the chairman's role, it's really different from the other members' roles. In the event that the chairman really takes an active leading role in the board of directors, I would say that the board of directors will be many times better in achieving its results than with a more passive chairman. And then a working software is the primary measure of progress. And here I was again thinking that what will I put here? I'm not certain if I made the right choice. First, I was thinking that working products or working services, that they are the best measure of progress. Then I was thinking about satisfied employees or satisfied customers. But then I think that a company might go bust, although it would be having really happy customers or employees. That the shareholder value really has to have certain meaning. But I'm not sure whether I made the right decision here. What do you think about the principle number 7? What should be the objective of the board?
Consider that in the long run, then you need to take into account the employees and the customers. In that sense, it's shareholder value, not maybe in the time frame.
Yes, that would be a great answer.
I think that the original emphasized that you need to get the working software as quick as possible. And so how do you translate that principle? So how do you get shareholder value fast?
I heard really good sentence in one event last autumn. It was something around this, that if you want to know how your company was doing yesterday, look at the financial statements. If you want to know how your company is doing today, look at your customers. If you want to find out how your company will be doing tomorrow, look at your employees. And I think that this also then will be ending up in culture. Let's be agile here. Yes, it's a learning organization, because if the organization is learning, then the company is progressing every day. And then also sustained development, as it's promoted in the original Agile principles, it should also then be promoted here. And then continuous attention now not to the budgets, but to business performance, how the company is doing month by month, and also to the rolling forecasts. And it means then that not the budgeting process once in a year, but maybe once in the month, there will be happening changes in the rolling forecast, how we will be responding to the changes in the marketplace. And then I think that the simplicity principle, it goes just 100% similar to the board work as in software development. And I would say then that not to maximize control, to minimize control, and then to maximize the self-organizing teams. The best strategies and practices and resolutions and also culture emerge when the teams really have the powers to make decisions themselves. And then the last principle is also that at regular intervals the board reflects on how to become more effective. It means that the board should have some kind of survey, and then there would be a really open discussion based on the outcome of this survey. And here I think that I know many companies where the board really does these surveys and has good discussions, how could we become better in this. And there's one problem still in typical Finnish boards is that I think that they're too static. People, they sit at the boards of directors for a too long time. And in the event that you are then replaced, it's considered something like that you were fired from your board position in a company. And it would be some kind of loss for a person to then be replaced from a board from a public listed company or something like that. But I think that a healthy board would be renewed partially every and each year. And people, when they start there, they would know that it might be 3 years or 5 years or something that I will be here, and after that I will be continuing, and there will be other people who will be then following me here. And then to close my presentation here, I then made a chairman's checklist, and it has 10 items, and the idea is that this will be then taken together, everything that we have been discussing before, and it would be something that could be quite practical. First of all, what comes to the chairmans, and this is also for the shareholders, be ambitious in building a winning team. Really think it through what kind of board you would be liking to then build. Do not just stick to your organization's own people, but think also about outsiders, so independent experts. And then pay attention to diversity, so it means that there would be both genders and there would be both older and younger people and maybe from different backgrounds and different countries and so on. I still remember my first visit to the board meeting of one public listed company, and when I entered the room, I found out that I think that there were 7 or 8 of them, and they were all gray-haired men. There was one youngster who was 45. And then they had discussions about company cultures and so on. And I say that they really would have needed some kind of maybe, for example, younger people from other professions than to just challenge them. And then ensure that the composition could be then annually renewed. If not annually renewed, you should at least think it annually. Should this be renewed? And then third, actively lead the board. Then if you are the chairman, you should be really working also between the meetings. And you should be really thinking that how do I get the best possible outcome of the 4 hours we have next month? Then let the CEO lead the company. Do not then step on his or her toes. And then remember this 80-20 rule. Cooperate not only with the CEO, but also with the management group. So if you're a chairman or if you're the board member, I think that you should know the names and you should know the backgrounds, and you should have discussed with all the CXO people in the company. It's also one way to then limit your risks. If the CEO is the only person you know from the company, he or she will also be the gatekeeper, what kind of information to be given to the board and what not. Don't waste your organization's time for traditional budgeting. Conduct self-assessment at least annually. And then a really important issue, from a good meeting, the CEO walks out more energized than she or he was when walking in. So you should not only be challenging the CEO and giving counter arguments and so on, but you should also be supporting your CEO. And in the event that this is not happening, it means that either the CEO is wrong or then the board is wrong. In the event that several meetings continue then without you then being able to cheer up your CEO, then you really should be changing the guy there. And then the last item here, simple is beautiful. Although you would be working at the board of a international company, a multi-billion-dollar company, still simple would be beautiful. The thinking does not have to be that abstract there. It's still layman's reasoning does a great deal there. So this is all I had then prepared for this set. And as said, it was a really interesting task for me then also to think about board work from a new perspective. Please. Mm. You take up a really good point here, and I'm afraid that this kind of risk exists in a majority of companies, that the board really has no real touch about what information they are getting and what they are missing. I would say that in, for example, strategy work and in other kinds of works also, it would be really important then also to take take on also the lower parts of the organization and get feedback from them and so on. And then still a good board, in addition to that, would ensure that they would be having contact to separate parts of the organization, but they would be having those contacts so that they are visible to the CEO at the same time. But I would say that in practice there would be much to be improved in those areas. Please.
I'm sorry, we have to continue this last question and then we continue with the...
All right.
Curious, I mean, in the end, this is much about values. And if we think of many traditional corporations, they have many of the value statements companies have. They're the normal corporate rules. If they don't different five words that they don't really let's take all the same. And in the end, I mean, this is that you can't really have a revolutionized values in your company that really come from directly from the board. You really believe and they also live with it. Otherwise, it's just I think this is very much connected. How do you think about this?
I think that was an excellent point, as they say that hire and fire based on values in the organization. Why would that not also apply to the board members? And I think that still today, when they're searching for board members, people are not that ambitious, thinking that who could be the members in our next winning team. And in the event that they are still thinking about the professional background or then maybe the age or gender or location and so on. But I haven't been hearing that much discussion about then think about the values of the board members or the board member candidates. But I also think that the companies, they will be dying or then succeeding based on the values in the company. And it would be extremely important that the board members would be sharing them. This was a really good point to close this presentation. Thanks. Thanks for everybody.